We used to have the cheapest power prices in the world, but now we've got some of the most expensive, and increasingly, of course, our power supply is unreliable. Between 2012 and 2022, just as renewables started to enter the grid en masse, average wholesale power prices in Queensland, well, they rose by 457%. The same figure for New South Wales, well, that was 346%. And in South Australia, over the same period, power prices there rose by 245%. Victoria, 234%. This is extraordinary, and the consequences, of course, for households and business have been profound. Since the late 1990s, Australia's lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. Over the past decade or so, Australia's manufacturing output has fallen by 5% in real terms. Now we rely on China for practically everything, whether it's solar panels, batteries, refined petroleum products, steel, fertiliser and more. Today, the head of the Australian Energy Market Operator, Daniel Westerman, this is AEMO, warned that investment in new green electricity is not happening fast enough to replace the coal power capacity we're shutting down. Energy giant BP says poor policy means projects in Australia in the energy space will go elsewhere and we will be left behind. To reduce emissions by 43%, of course, that's what Labor has locked us into, Australia will need to install 40 7-megawatt wind turbines every month from now until 2030, each one as tall as the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We'll need to install more than 22,500-watt solar panels every day for the next 8 years. And reaching net zero by 2050 will require 30 times more storage capacity in batteries and pumped hydro than we have now. Joining me to discuss the latest, the Australian Environment Editor, Graham Lloyd. Graham, welcome as always. We rely on you to help us get through the calamity of this energy train wreck we're about to embark upon. You've heard all those figures. Now, how on earth will Chris Bowen reach net zero ambitions and keep the lights on and jobs in Australia?
Well, good evening, Peter. This is the cascading disaster that we're now used to. The rhetoric has changed from, look, we need the government to give us certainty so we can make all this happen, to, oh my God, we've got certainty, and that certainty is that we're probably not going to be able to do it. So it's an extraordinary situation, and those cost increases that you've mentioned, they're for things that have been done so far. They really only point to what's coming around the corner. And everybody is zeroing in on the inability to deliver these transmission lines, which are supposed to make it possible to link up all the renewable energy projects. And for an indication of how hard this is, the government is now offering $400,000 a kilometre to farmers to put these transmission lines across their land, and a number of farmers still aren't taking it up. So there's 9,000 kilometres has to be built. It won't all be on private land, but gee, it's a tough ask.
I don't think there's a day that goes by where there's not a significant energy corporate player out in the media telling us how crook things are, how that even with the best will in the world, this is all unachievable. Is this part of a plan by the corporate sector to get taxpayer dollars in to fast-track some of this stuff? Is that what they're angling for here? And Labor's likely then to open the books and, you know, throw more money at renewables?
Well, it's like a two-card trick, isn't it, Peter? The first thing is you get the other party to sign itself up so deep it can't get back out, and then say, well, look, the only way this can be done is, for vast amounts of public funding. This is exactly what's happened in this space in the UK in particular, where power costs are now ridiculous. So the government's in this position. It's been fought as an ideological war to this point to encourage everybody to get there. But at some point, economics and engineering and all those unfashionable things are going to come to the surface because they are what is going to make it happen.
Yeah, and of course this $80 billion we're going to spend on transmission lines, that's just moving the power around. That's not generating any power. We could get one of those new supercritical coal-fired power stations, 40% less emissions in these new, very super modern plants, they'll cost about $5 billion to build. They actually generate power, not just move power around. The government's long said, we can't do nuclear because it's too expensive. Again, if we're spending $80 billion in poles and wires, that makes nuclear seem very affordable to me.
Well, certainly, that $80 billion, that's only a small part of what's required. We go back that, look, this is an ideological argument, and you would remember well the sort of teeth gnashing around whether we should go to supercritical coal, whether we should bring nuclear in, and they were all just completely ruled out of hand because they still say renewables are the cheapest form of energy. Well, we haven't really got to the point yet where ideology has been surrendered. And we're going to get back to really doing the numbers and making sure that it works properly.
Okay, now I'm critical with the government there on renewables, but I do think there was a good move today. They've put $500 million on the table in relation to processing critical minerals, rare earth minerals here in Australia. I guess one of the concerns at the current rates of production, though, it's going to take 400 years to mine enough nickel to phase out fossil fuels. And given a lot of this is already done by China, are we far enough ahead of the game to be competitive?
Well, certainly the big thing that's happening globally here is the US has recognised that China has got a stranglehold on a lot of these metals and minerals, and it needs to break that. So there's a huge incentive for friendly countries to get into the business of mining and processing these things. It works in two ways. The Australian government wants to make sure that we don't just dig it up and ship it off, we actually value add to it. But there's also a big irony here. They were talking about it in question time today, and how important particularly aluminium is to hold solar panels and as part of the transition and what have you. But aluminium is an incredibly energy-hungry product. It is a big electricity user. It is on the margins with what's happening now with power. So our fight is to keep these things that we've already got, as well as build the capacity that's going to be needed in the future.
You are spot on. We've only got two smelters in this country, at Tomago in New South Wales and the Portland smelter, and taxpayers, at least I know in the case of Portland, have had to chip in to make the power bills there affordable to keep smelting in Australia. We'll see what happens. Graham, thank you as always.